On this episode of MotoringBox, we're going to be pulling the pig out of my BA Falcon XR6 Turbo. Welcome back to MotoringBox. I'm Sean McKellar. This is my 2004 BA Falcon Mark II XR6 Turbo. And today we're taking a step back before we can take 2 steps forward, because I'm actually pulling a Piggyback ECU out of this car. You see, when I bought this car, I thought it was stock standard, but after the first couple of drives, it became apparent that it was producing way more boost than a stock standard XR6 Turbo should, around 15 or 16 PSI. So I did a little bit of digging around. The ECU is still, as you can see, the stock standard unit, but there is an additional loom spliced into it, which is disappearing down behind the dash. And I found behind the passenger side kick panel, there is an aftermarket Piggyback ECU. And just because this car is running a Piggyback ECU, that means that it has been tuned quite some time ago. I estimate the mid 2000s, probably 2005, 6 or 7. Because back then, flash tuning was really still in its infancy for these cars. So if you wanted to get your XR6 Turbo tuned, I believe there was the XCal or some of those other sort of handheld flash tuner jobbies, or you could go for a sort of standalone Piggyback ECU system, which would intercept signals coming to and from your ECU and sort of trick the car into running higher boost, different timing, different fuel maps and things like that. So that is exactly what is happening here, and unfortunately it means that there's not really anyone around these days who actually still runs this particular tuning software for this ECU. Now, if you didn't see my previous video, I'll put a link up in the corner here, but basically it is a Redcliffe Dyno Piggyback ECU running the PowerMod tuning software. So that was back in the heyday of sort of Windows XP, has a serial connection, so that's really telling you really all you need to know. It's quite old school technology. And a lot of the tuning in that software, which I was able to locate and have a look at, is really intercepting signals coming to and from the ECU and applying a percentage change. So it's kind of not talking absolute values for pretty much any aspect of the engine. It's just doing a percentage change on what the stock standard ECU is doing. So really it's quite a dodgy system when you look at it in 2021. Back in the day, I'm sure it was all cutting edge because there really weren't any other better solutions available. But yeah, in 2021, it's got to go, because if you want to get a Barra turbo tuned these days, you either get a PCM Tech flash tune or you get a standalone Haltech ECU. And both of those solutions mean that that Piggyback ECU absolutely cannot be staying in this car any longer. Now, if I'm honest with you, this job actually scares the shit out of me, because I haven't really pulled this ECU out, but you can see a whole lot of, I wouldn't call it a rat's nest of wiring, but there is a lot going on under here. So I think, well, I hope it's going to be one of those jobs that when you just start having a look at it and take a step back and just really figure out what's going on, I reckon one by one we can probably unpick where the wires have been spliced and then put them back as they should be. So yeah, I'm a little bit frightened, but let's get this ECU out and we'll have a look at what's underneath. And this isn't really going to be a tutorial, because out of all of you guys watching, there's probably only 1 or 2 of you who actually own an XR6 Turbo that run this system. So this information is no good to any of you. It's really just another step on my journey of getting this car ready to get tuned. So let's have a look. Now, the first giveaway that this car has been messed with is that the ECU actually has bolts with an Allen key head, because as standard, these cars actually have a particular type of bolt. The name escapes me, but basically the head of the bolt snaps off and it leaves you with a surface which you actually can't get a tool onto. Now, I don't know, that's probably some kind of security solution to make the ECU really hard to remove. I wouldn't imagine many people would be trying to steal these. Maybe back in the day it was different. But yeah, someone's actually gotten those out already and replaced them with bolts with an Allen key head. So that of course makes my job today a little bit easier. If your car still does have these, actually, you know what? No one's gonna be doing this anyway. And we should be able to get access to the connectors on the underside. This green wire is which goes nowhere. It's kind of spliced into a brown wire, which is completely unshielded. And the rest of it has just got electrical tape on it. So yeah, look, it's not ideal. I guess it speaks volumes about whoever it was that actually installed this thing in the first place. Right, there we go. There's the stock standard ECU, we'll put him aside. And it's up to us. I guess we just work per connector. And hopefully all of the wiring colors are fairly unique. So if there's a yellow one that's kind of been spliced and is disappearing and then coming back, we can hopefully marry those two ends of the wire up and rejoin it. So straight away I can see the part of the original loom that's disappearing off here to the engine. There is an additional one here and then a third one kind of running down that way. But there is this fourth one. And this one here is the cancer that we basically have to cut out of this system. So, but look at the mess of wiring that's coming out of here, Jesus. So we'll probably have to peel back some of this tape and have a look and see what we're dealing with. We're talking about a bit of archaeology here. It's been at least probably 15 years since someone's been in here screwing around with everything. In my original video I made about this Piggyback ECU, I mistakenly said that Redcliffe Dyno, which is the mob that installed this, is actually real dyno nowadays, but I've been informed that they are two completely different businesses managed by different people. I'd just like to clarify that. The work you're seeing here is definitely not an indication of what you might get from them. So we've got a few wires here as well that are just going nowhere, so I'm assuming perhaps this Piggyback ECU system is kind of a generic sort of a system for a few different cars, and perhaps those wires were just not needed for this particular installation. I do not have a pinout or anything for the Piggyback ECU. There's no information online just because of how old it is. I wonder if it's worth just cutting this loom off and just pulling it out of the way, but then your car's definitely not going to run unless you get everything rewired, so that's the concern. Now today guys, I'm actually trialing a new style of wire connector, I guess, and they call this thing a heat shrink solder sleeve, I believe. So let me see if I can get the camera to focus on this. So what this actually is like the name suggests, it is a heat shrink tube, but in the middle is a blob of solder. So basically if you feed the wire in each side of this thing, and I believe these red elements here actually hold those wires in when it shrinks, so they hold on to the wires, and then this blob of solder in the middle here will melt and sort of spread out sideways as well. So what this means is, in theory, if you heat this whole thing with a heat gun with the wires in place, the solder will melt and spread through both of the wires, joining them together, and then these red elements here will actually hold those wires in place. So just with using a heat gun, you should end up with a solid connection which has been soldered. So to me, something like that is ideal for what we're doing here, but let's see if it actually works, because I've never actually used them before. So if we try this here on the ground first, because I reckon I won't be able to film it very easily in the engine bay, it should just be a matter of getting both of your wires. That solder in the middle is actually a ring, so you can sort of put each wire through it, like so. And then it should just be a matter of getting a heat gun. I'm not really sure what temperature. And there you have it. I think that's it. So I had to set the gun to 250 degrees at the end. Looks like we have a solid connection. So the alfoil is just to try and control where the heat goes. My heat gun came with a whole lot of attachments on it. Some of them like nice focused kind of attachments to get the heat into one little direct area, but I can't find where they are, so I'm just using what I can here at the moment. You can see the solder spreading out around all of the wires. That's cool. Now I assume we better let it cool before we put any pressure on it, because if that solder is still liquefied, then the wires are going to pull straight out of it. even just squeezing it a little bit looks like it's helping the solder to spread, so that's probably a cool idea if you've got gloves on. From memory, this third connector is to do with boost. Might be your boost sensor. $250 appears to be the temperature you want. I'll have to get some loom tape. I don't have any at the moment, but these wires are just really hanging out here under this sort of mounting here for the ECU, so I don't think they're really going to be affected by heat or anything too much. So in the meantime, it should be all right. We'll come back and tidy that up a bit later on, perhaps when we do the next little step on this. And now we can look at the shit show that is connectors 1 and 2. Right, so a quick status update. I've got everything on the second loom connector here sorted out. Even though the existing wires weren't cut, the ones that have been spliced in were done quite messily with a lot of solder that I couldn't really melt to get off. So I actually just cut all of those wires and used these new heat shrink connectors to connect them all up. So they're all looking really neat as can be. Again, I don't have any loom tape. I'll have to get some to put around this, but for now that'll be fine. So we'll try and get this one out of the way and turn our attention to this beast right here. It's not going to be fun at all. So almost all of these have been intercepted. To give you an idea, this one here, it's actually got 2 wires connected onto this one, but it's a brown wire, and if we just look on the other side, down here, we'll be able to find the one that it should be joined onto. So we're just gonna have to do that with every single one. And yeah, look, it's gonna take time. So I'll check in with you guys towards the end. Alrighty, so I'm getting towards the end of the job here. I've got 2 left, but the worrying thing is that both of these wires are white. So I'm going to see if I can find a pinout diagram. I think TI Performance had one. Okay, so it's pin number 41, and the other one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think it's 7. Now let's see what this says. Injector. So number 7 is the injectors, and number 41, crank position negative. Jesus. So the question is, do you really have to take a 50-50 stab in the dark, or is there another way to work this out? The only logic I've got here is that this one is slightly shorter, so perhaps I will team it with this one that is slightly longer. The difference here is next to nothing, whereas the difference here is quite substantial. Hold on to your butts. Oh no. Now I've had the battery disconnected, so the ECU is going to be well and truly reset, which it'll need to be because it's essentially waking up from the dreamland that it's been in for the past 15 years. It's really been living a lie. This whole time it reckons it's been powering a stock standard unmodified XR6 turbo engine, Barra turbo, whereas in reality it's been very different. To me, if it didn't have a proper reading off the crank angle sensor and injector number 2, I think it was, is not being driven, then it shouldn't cause an issue. But let's turn the ignition on and see what happens.
Hold on to your butts.
She wasn't running the smoothest, but it did sound like it was on all 6 cylinders, so I think I've actually got it the correct way around, which I cannot believe. So back in the day, I took some steps to preempt what was going to happen here, and hopefully it's going to make my job a little bit easier. So what I've done is this Piggyback ECU actually has a vacuum hose, which you can see here, which runs all the way down to the unit itself. I've actually stuffed it up in behind here because it fit better than where it was previously down there. So we just need to loosen it and pull it down. I think I've got some zip ties on it, cable ties. I'll just pull that thing out so it doesn't blind me. It already has. Just gonna make sure we're actually cutting cable ties and not a part of the wiring harness. And here we go, here she is. So this is the other end of the loom, which we terminated or cut out in the engine bay. So we can give this thing the flick. So we'll put him aside, and yeah, we'll probably try and pull the loom through from the inside of the car, just because this end is quite chunky. It'd probably be quite difficult to pull it out the other way. And the other thing we're going to do is this vacuum hose here. And then hopefully, if I cut some more cable ties that are on this little wiring harness, because I really wanted this held in place so it wasn't rattling around. Whoever installed it back in the day, they just kind of jammed it in behind this panel, and then they just jammed the panel on and then called it a day. So when I found it, I wanted to try and improve on it. But now, of course, we're going to be pulling this out. So hopefully I can literally do just that. Might have to go have a look in the engine bay and see what's stopping it. So here's the other end of the loom. I can't really feel it getting jammed on anything, so I probably just have to keep pulling away from the inside and see if I can get it through. Hopefully it's not connected into anything else on the way. I don't think it would be, just because that would have made installation fairly difficult. All right, here we go. There we go, beautiful. So as I suspected, there were no additional connections anywhere on the way. And we can finally get this thing out of the car. So as I mentioned, we need to fix up this vacuum line as well. Otherwise we've got a bit of a leak, vacuum leak happening there. So I'll spare you guys the boredom of this, but here's the vacuum line where it comes out from the engine bay. I've got a T-piece. T goes to this sensor for the boost gauge. And then this is the part that went to the Piggyback ECU, which has been taken out. So as you can see, I did redo this line with this modification in mind. So really the plan here is to remove the T-piece, and then we'll put our little vacuum sensor straight onto the end of this hose here. Cool, there's our T-piece removed, and then this goes straight onto this. Can't get any neater than that. That's it, guys, we are done. We've successfully excised the Piggyback ECU from the XR6 Turbo, and the car should be back to stock standard condition as far as the tune goes anyway, which means it is not going to be a happy chappy, that's for sure, because these cars don't actually like it if you upgrade the exhaust and don't get them tuned, especially if you change the dump pipe and the cat converter. What happens then is the turbocharger can generate more boost, the engine goes into overboost, it starts cutting out and basically stuffing you around, so it's not going to run very well on boost at the moment after we've taken this thing out. But that's okay, because coming up in one of the future videos soon, I'm going to be doing something about it. So stay tuned, look forward to that, but in the meantime, I'm really glad this thing's out of the car. It is a step backwards before we go forwards, but this will allow us to take a monumental step forward in the near future. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. If you want to support the channel, click the like button below, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and you can also come on board and support the channel further if you want to, either by joining a channel membership or Patreon, which is also available. So check out all of the names below. These guys really help to make these videos happen, and I appreciate their support. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Oh yeah.